late March. It's almost April, and so I'm going to do a quick walk around. We've had some very strange weather. We had in February well, December and January were very nice, and then February we had heavy snows. We had, in fact, record snows in February, and then now in March we've had some record highs. This guy here, this was a little dwarf tree that's grown very big, and it was very solid. And now you can see here the snow had pushed a lot of the branches down. So now there's some light getting in there. I think I'll come in here probably and thin this. Should probably take out a few of the branches to let some light get in, so you don't have, you know, all this dead stuff where it wasn't getting any light, and now it is, because those branches got bent down. The primroses over here are doing wonderfully this year. This is a pot that's got some volunteer columbines. That's what these leaves are. It's got a chrysanthemum, which hasn't done much yet because chrysanthemums bloom in the fall, of course. So it should be sprouting leaves pretty soon unless it's dead. And then this primrose I probably planted a couple of primroses I bought from the store, you know, like 5 years ago. And they just keep coming back every spring. They're pretty hardy. Let's see what we can do. So we've got is a lot of stuff that's bent down, and some of it has bounced back, and some of it hasn't. So we'll have an interesting time here. This is something that's in the rhododendron family. I forget exactly. It's some kind of azalea or rhododendron. It's got a bloom on it. These are some azaleas here, which have been chomped on pretty hard by the deer. The deer have come through here a number of times. Some of these natives have done fine. These Mahonia here, like this guy. This one has a very interesting pattern on the stalk. You know how it has those weird curves. That's because it keeps falling over, and I stake it back up. So it falls over, it grows for a while. I stake it up, it grows for a while, and so it ends up with these curves, which is, I don't know, kind of cool. These are some little shrubs here that I planted last year. Spirea, that's what they are. They're spirea. And they look like they made it through the winter just fine. They should get quite a bit bigger, I hope. Yeah, this is some more. This is a volunteer evergreen huckleberry, which I've let go, and because I like it. And then there's some Mahonia here, which are all doing fine. This is some ornamental evergreens here. This one did pretty well. This one not so much. Again, the branches have been smushed down and they haven't come up. So maybe I'll come in there and thin that. Not sure what to do with that guy. This was very nice and full. It looked more like it does over on this side last year, all the way around. Little Frida's doing okay here. I've trimmed. This is where I trimmed. She was getting kind of leggy, so I trimmed it hoping she'd fill out. And by the cut on some of these leaves, I can tell that the deer have been after it. This is where the barberry had blocked out the sun. So this one here, you can tell, is bent over because of the heavy snow. I'm still determined that this is going to fill out eventually. I may cut it back and then let it grow up again from the bottom. Let's see. Pampas grass did okay. The big California lilac looks fine. There's a little shrub rose that came up last year that I had completely forgotten about, and it looks okay. There's a couple of surviving daffodils stuck in here and there. There's one growing up through this tree. This is another tree that was all nice and full, and then the snow, you can see where the snow here has kind of smushed it down. These California lilacs here are looking a little sparse. Here's one that's got a dead branch, it looks like. Need to cut that off. And I guess that's the crocuses did pretty well this year. There was probably not quite as many as in previous years, but all of a sudden all the flowers completely disappeared. And usually they'll get wet and they'll fall, and they'll just be lying there on the ground all smushed. But the flowers are completely gone. So I'm suspecting something likes to eat the flowers. We've got these little purple guys here are coming up. There's a few volunteers. Delphiniums, I think they are. There's some volunteers there. There's some over there. Okay, that's it for the front yard. This is a new potted plant that I got. It's still in the plastic that it came from the store. I'll put it into pottery sometime. It's called a ponytail palm, but it's not actually a palm, I found out. It's actually in the asparagus family, and it's more closely related to like agave or century or Joshua trees than it is to palm trees. It's going to be an indoor plant here, I think. It'll probably be a slow grower if I keep it in a pot like this with desert soil, succulent soil. They say the biggest danger is if you overwater them, so I'll try not to overwater it. But I think it's a kind of a cool looking thing. It can handle some freezing temperatures, but I think it has trouble when it gets down in the 20s. So I can put it outside here in the summer for sure. The big camellia here, it had just started to bloom on schedule, or in fact a little early, when the snows hit. So it completely stopped blooming. A number of the buds, like here's a bud here that just died. A number of the buds froze off and never bloomed like those. But enough of them did now that the ones that were behind are now blooming. So it's got quite a few blooms on now. It had a few, and then of course none, and now it's going to finish up its job. So it's kind of a strange year for it. The hydrangeas are this ground cover's got some little purple flowers here, which are kind of nice. The hydrangeas here are starting to leaf out. I've come in here and deadheaded them. What I do is I come in with my pruner and I try to prune it just above the top leaf, and then last year's growth there goes off into the compost bin. This is what I'm finding all over the place. There's these twigs everywhere because the snow knocked a lot of the dead branches off of the trees, and so they're everywhere. They're in the lawn. I haven't mowed yet. It's time to break out the lawnmower here for the backyard at least. But you can see, like in the yard, there's signs of the wind and the snow did things like this. There's little branches down all over the place. Let's take a look back here in the woods. This is my woods. I have thinned it a little bit. I think I've counted now in the last year or so, I've taken down like 5 trees back here to open it up a little bit. And I used to take and of course use the trees for firewood, but I don't burn much anymore, so the trees now get to stay out here and become food for the critters and homes for the critters and stuff, the ones that are still standing. This one here is one I took down. You can see it's a pretty good size. It's going to just stay there, and eventually it'll rot back into the soil to feed the next generation. But what I'm looking for is to see if the trilliums are up yet this year. I don't think so. It's probably a little early. Probably a little early for trilliums. There's a invasive, I can't remember what it is, invasive Christmas berry kind of plant there. Yeah, usually this is where the trilliums come up, but I'm not seeing them yet. It's a little early. I don't think they usually come out till April. Anyway, if we walk, yeah, see, here's one that the bark has been peeling off of. This is an older tree that's been leaning up here for quite a few years. I don't see any woodpecker holes or anything in it though, unfortunately. That's kind of what I'm going for back here. Some of these things on the ground here, most of these actually came from, storms. This forest, I'm sure after it was cut, this forest was planted with Doug fir, so it's a monoculture more or less, and they're too close. So what's going to happen over time is it's going to thin itself naturally. It just takes 20 to 100 years for that to happen, and it's going to die out. And then some of the things will change. Like there's some red cedars over there, and they're a little bit more shade tolerant, so they'll grow. Here's something here that I did not do this. This is something that the snow did right there. Ripped that off of a tree above me somewhere. The ferns are all kind of laying flat, but as the weather warms, they'll pop up. These are foxgloves here. The fact that they're already leafed out that much means maybe these are last year's and they're going to actually bloom. Foxgloves are biennial. They just have leaves the first year. They have their big stalk and bloom the second year, and then the third year they're gone. So they only live for 2 years. Yeah, I haven't been back here yet. There's quite a bit of down timber. This is all. And looking in this direction now, we're looking mostly east. So our house is in the direction behind us. And I haven't, my intent is to leave this area here as a natural area, which is why I get deer and other critters in our yard, because they'd rather move through here than down a residential street. So they move through my forest back here when they're moving from one area to another. This is salal, native ground cover. I like it. This is evergreen huckleberry, native plant. I like it. And there's some other stuff in here. This is a red huckleberry that's just starting to get its leaves right here. I recognize a little twig there. There's two kinds of huckleberries. And some of these other tree plants and bushes and shrubs and stuff, there's back in here, I'm sure there's salmonberry and sarvisberry and stuff like that, which are native berries. But they're not going to be looking at like much this time of year. They're just barely starting to get their leaves. So there's a lot of downed wood on the fourth floor right now because of this place in the life cycle this forest is. So pretty soon, like here you can see, look at all the moss that's growing on this old log. Pretty soon it'll start to look a little bit more like an old growth forest instead of a commercial forest waiting for its next cutting. Because every year these trees sequester carbon, which is a good thing, because I like to drive my truck into town sometimes, and I use carbon when I do that. I emit carbon with my truck. So it's nice to have something that puts it back into the environment. Well, I'm going to end that here. That's plenty long, so you can kind of see where we are. We've had a very strange winter, which I guess is going to be the new norm. We had warm weather, and then we had record snow, and then we had warm weather. And last week or so, it's been more normal. Although we're not having we just had a tiny rain shower in the last week. So everything's still green, of course, but I'm hoping that we get a little more rain in the next month.